Howdy, howdy, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to be diving into the most crucial aspect of terrarium building, which is the false bottom. And we're also going to touch up on some of the best materials to use for a terrarium, vivarium, or paludarium hardscape. Not only will your hardscape determine the way that your terrarium will look, it also works in tandem with the false bottom and ensures that your terrarium is working and functioning properly. I'm going to walk you through the different styles of false bottoms and of course some of the best products to use when creating your hardscape. In addition, I have my basket of wonderment we're going to go through today that has a bunch of the materials that you might need, as well as some other great options for hardscapes. So, what exactly is a false bottom? Let's dive into that. A false bottom is a drainage layer where your excess water from misting will collect. Furthermore, if you build a paludarium, it's actually part of your water section. It's just the part that's not visible. Here is a great example of a false bottom in action on one of my paludariums. The plant's roots still can go through to the water section, but it separates the substrate from the water that's visible. The main function of the false bottom is to keep your substrate separate from that water collecting at the bottom. This will prevent root rot and also will prevent bad bacteria from forming, creating that nasty smell. Rule of thumb, your terrarium should smell incredible, kind of like the ground cover of a rainforest or a regular forest floor after a fresh rain. If your terrarium doesn't smell right, you didn't do the false bottom correctly. We're going to go in depth on different ways and materials to use when designing a terrarium false bottom, starting with this aquarium divider grid. Personally, this is one of my favorite materials to use because it's super lightweight and it's versatile. It's the ideal material to use when building a false bottom. There's little pegs that you can stick into the holes on the bottom, and you can even stack them on top of each other so you can get the optimal amount of height to your false bottom. It's not just awesome for building a drainage layer, but also works great as a backdrop for your terrarium or vivariums, especially when coupled with some of the materials we'll be using in the later parts of this video. Ever since I discovered it on Amazon about a year and a half ago, I've been using it for all of my vivarium, terrarium, and paludarium builds, the backdrop as well as the water sections for my paludariums. It really makes the beginning stages of the build, which can sometimes be kind of hard, a much more simple process. You can also stack them as high as you like. This comes in handy, especially when building custom waterfall features. I'll go into more depth about that in later videos. Aquarium filter foam works great with your aquarium divider grid. There's several reasons that I really like this product. Once again, it's lightweight. It's designed for specifically aquariums, so you know it's safe to use, and it also allows roots to draw in through the filter foam. So it's multifunctional and it's got a lot of versatility. It can be easily cut and molded the way you want it to look, and I personally like to use it as a barrier between the land and water sections of my paludariums. It also works great as an added barrier between your water and your substrate. Pairing it with that aquarium divider grid makes for one of the easiest assemblies of a drainage layer. Alternatively, you can also pair the aquarium divider grid with some window screen to build your drainage layer and to keep that substrate off the water level. Just make sure it's not sprayed with chemicals to keep bugs off, and make sure that it's not metal so it doesn't rust. You can also opt to make your entire drainage layer out of just aquarium filter foam, like I did for this paludarium build, and it worked out really well in the end. The pump in that tower in the back draws the water through the filter foam, where the roots from the plants draw nutrients from it, cleaning it, also keeping the substrate off. One of the most important things that you're going to need is a way to keep all of these materials together. And the best way to do that is to seal them together with aquarium safe silicone. Personally, I like to use the black because it blends in well with the terrarium and it's easier to hide. But you can use clear or pretty much any color you want. You just want to make sure that it's aquarium safe silicone. I'll link all of the products that I use in this video in the video description to make it easier for you to find. A lot of people are going to want to put some sort of a water feature in your terrarium. For that, you're going to need a good pump. Personally, I don't go too crazy and I just buy these cheap $10, $15 pumps. They're usually a low kilowatt and don't make a lot of noise. Now that we know how to build the false bottom, let's talk about the hardscape. And this is where things get really interesting, and personally, I think this is when things get a lot more fun. For that, you've got different options. Spiderwood is a great one because it's very Jurassic looking in appearance. It's also a hardwood, so it won't rot out quickly. And I personally like to incorporate it in the backdrops of my polydarium or terrarium designs. Or you could go a little bit bigger. This is called Mapani Driftwood. I actually got this piece from Petco. It was kind of an impulse buy. I haven't 100% decided what to do with this yet, but I'm definitely going to be building a terrarium with this as the centerpiece. And that brings me to my next point. When you're building your hardscape, I personally like to focus on a focal point, one or two main attractions that ultimately blow people away. And you can build everything else based on that design. The advantage of picking one centerpiece to put in your terrarium is it gives you a great base to build off of. This is much easier than just trying to come up with a design all out of your own imagination. Just make sure you keep your eyes peeled when you're at the pet store, because you'll never know when you might get inspired. This allows you to pick the ideal enclosure for your centerpiece. I went with a vertical tank to fit the vertical nature of the wood. This right here is called Dragonstone, which is another one of those great hardscape items to use. It's once again got a very Jurassic look to it, and it's got all these tiny little openings that look very cool, but can also provide lots of great shelter for the invertebrates and even small frogs or whatever else you're putting in your polydarium or terrarium. And another benefit of this is that it's pH neutral, meaning you can put this in the water section of your water setup and it's not going to change the pH or alter the water chemistry too much, which is a great thing and something you definitely want to keep in mind. That being said, all of the materials I use are with that in mind because pH is very important. I actually went kind of crazy with the Dragonstone in this build. I built a tower out of acrylic glass and joined the pieces together using aquarium safe silicone, the clear version, and then I put some red LED lights behind it, giving it kind of like a lava volcano look, something that I've personally never seen before, so it's original. Speaking of pH, you definitely want to account for that when you're using driftwood. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Most of the hardwoods that you're going to get from a pet store have what's called tannins in the wood. The best way to eliminate them is to boil it for several hours. The tannins in the water not only stain the water red over time, but will also lower the pH, making it acidic. Another huge advantage to boiling the wood is that it makes it nice and soft, so you can use a drill to help direct the water flow if you're choosing to use it as a waterfall feature. This way, you can make sure that the water is flowing exactly how you want it to, but you can do it on the sly, so you won't really be able to tell that you cheated on it a little bit, especially when there's water flowing over it. I personally wanted to make sure that the water only flowed on the inside of the wood, so there'd be a contrast between the wet and the dry. Various different types of slate can be used to make water features really pop. I like them because it lets water roll off the top of it and it gives off a great shimmer. So this is an option if you're going to be building a terrarium with a waterfall section. I always lay all the rocks out and examine them for a while, figure out which rocks will look the best stacked on top of each other. Then I simply use a combination of aquarium divider grid and aquarium safe silicone to attach them piece by piece. This can be kind of tedious, but it's well worth it if you do it right. One of the disadvantages is that you have to wait for the silicone to cure before you can add the next rock. So this may take you several days, but it also allows you to really study each rock and come up with some really crazy designs. Don't get me wrong though, it can definitely be kind of frustrating because water flow can be kind of unpredictable, so using expanding foam to help direct it where you want it to go is also an advantage. If you want to go really crazy, you can also add a fog machine. Just be aware that some animals don't do well with the fog because it can give them respiratory issues, kind of like poison dart frogs. It's totally up to you what you use for a hardscape and how you design it, which is kind of the fun of having polydarium or bioactive setups in general. Building a terrarium can be pretty expensive, So you want to make sure that whatever you're putting in there isn't going to contaminate or bring any sort of diseases into your environment. A great way to ensure that doesn't happen is to boil anything before you put it in your terrarium setup. Once you've built the skeleton, so to say, of your hardscape, the best way to tie it all together is with some expanding foam. It doesn't adhere directly to glass, so you're going to want to make sure that you at least score the glass with silicone and let it dry. But the aquarium divider grid is by far the best thing to use, in tandem with pieces of aquarium filter foam to give it some volume. One thing that you do want to be mindful of is that it is expanding foam, so it will expand to about twice the size. While the filter foam is still sticky, you can add objects like this hobbit hole or even cork bark or anything else that you choose to put in there. When the filter foam has finished curing, you're going to need to take a razor blade to it and shave off all the shiny outer bits. This is definitely one of the more tedious steps in building your terrarium, but it's also exciting because you're on the finish line of being done. Next, I always coat it with aquarium safe silicone and a combination of sphagnum moss and cocoa peat. This is great for adding wet moss mixes or other plants later when you build the backdrop in. Alternatively, you can also use cork bark as a background, which I personally like to put on some aquarium divider grid because it adheres to it really nicely. Another way that you can build a false bottom is actually to layer it with different types of rocks. One of the best rocks to use for this is actually lava rock. So why is that? Once again, it's a lot more lightweight than regular rocks, and it's porous, meaning that it allows water to seep through, which can be good for beneficial bacteria. Here you can see that I've layered it with two different types of lava rock. Red lava rock that I actually got from Home Depot, and the bag only cost $10 because they're using it for landscaping. Of course, you want to make sure that it's not treated with any chemicals, and once again, you want to at least wash them off, if not boil them first. I also got this little black lava rock to layer it on top of the larger. You always want to go large to small to not allow any of the substrate to get through, and then you want to put a leaf litter on top. And as you can see, this terrarium is absolutely thriving. It hasn't been open for over 2 years. I'll make videos in the future on how to build enclosed ecosystems like this that might actually outlive you yourself. If you made it this far in the video, I take it you probably took something away from this. And if you don't mind, throw me a quick like and a subscribe, and make sure that you check out the next video in the series. Or check out any one of my videos on my channel if you want complete build guides specific to each one of my terrariums. Thanks in advance, and I hope you have a good day.